We might as well begin with the question most people tiptoe around. What would actually happen if you could satisfy every desire you've ever had? Not the polite answer you give at dinner, and not the fantasy you use to distract yourself. I mean the real thing, total fulfillment without effort, without uncertainty, without the slightest resistance. Sit with that for a moment, because the moment you imagine it honestly, something uncomfortable appears. You think you want safety, a predictable life, a smooth path, no surprises. Yet your actions betray you. You chase stimulation. You seek drama. You cling to control with one hand and reach for excitement with the other. And you never question how contradictory that is. This is the human illusion, that control will secure happiness. So you tighten your routines, polish your lifestyle, optimize your productivity, upgrade your devices, curate your relationships. And for a brief moment, the world feels manageable. But the more perfectly you engineer your life, the more hollow it becomes, because life, unlike a machine, cannot stay alive without friction. A perfectly smooth world is not a paradise. It's anesthesia. We are taught to eliminate uncertainty as if it were some infectious disease, but uncertainty is the pulse of experience. The unexpected is what gives contour to existence. Without it, even pleasure collapses into monotony. If everything worked exactly the way you wanted, you would not be living, you would be operating. The truth is simple, but few people dare digest it. What you think you want and what keeps you alive are not the same thing. Like a child who tapes a butterfly's wings to keep it still. You try to pin down life's movement and end up killing the very thing you were trying to hold on to. You optimize yourself into numbness, secure yourself into boredom, and call it stability. So the question is not whether you can have everything you want. The question is, would you survive it? Alan Watts once invited people to imagine a world where every desire could be summoned with a single push of a button. A world where technology wasn't merely helpful, but omnipotent. And whether you realize it or not, you're already halfway there. The device in your pocket delivers food, entertainment, attention, information, validation, distraction, and company on demand. What used to require effort, waiting, curiosity, or courage now requires nothing but the mild twitch of your thumb. You get almost everything immediately, yet you feel less satisfied than ever. This is the paradox of the push-button world. The easier it becomes to fulfill a desire, the less fulfilling the desire becomes. When everything is instant, nothing sinks in. Pleasure arrives too quickly to gather meaning. Before your mind even registers it, your finger is already swiping toward the next hit. In the old stories, gods punished humans by giving them too little. Today, the punishment is the opposite. We drown in too much, delivered too easily. You live in what previous generations would have called a technological paradise. Yet you complain of emptiness, boredom, anxiety, and the constant sense that something vital is missing. And the part you rarely admit is, you have no idea what exactly is missing. Deep down, you suspect it isn't more convenience you're lacking. It's the friction that convenience erased. Watts foresaw this long before smartphones existed. He understood that a perfectly predictable world is indistinguishable from death. When a machine satisfies every wish instantly, the value of wishing evaporates. When gratification comes without effort, the psyche stops registering it as real. We evolved to struggle, to attempt, to reach. Fulfillment is built from the tension between desire and uncertainty. Remove the tension and you remove the satisfaction. The push-button world turns desire into a vending machine transaction. You order an experience the way you order a beverage, and both are consumed with the same disposable indifference. The more you automate pleasure, the more numb you become to it. But the most revealing part is this. Even surrounded by infinite shortcuts, you still feel behind. Even saturated with entertainment, you still feel restless. Even given access to the world's knowledge, you still feel confused. That sense of lack is not a malfunction of technology. It's the direct consequence of getting what you want too easily. When every path is smooth, you lose your grip on what it means to walk. When every desire is gratified, you lose your ability to truly desire. When life demands nothing of you, it stops feeling like life. This is the silent tragedy of modern comfort. The easier your world becomes, the more fragile your inner world becomes. And that's why the message of this section is brutally simple. When satisfaction becomes too easy, the experience of living becomes too faint. If you follow Alan Watts's thought experiment to its end, you arrive at the most revealing button of all, the one labeled surprise. In the fantasy where you possess absolute power, where every desire appears the instant you imagine it, the final craving that emerges is not pleasure, nor control, nor immortality, but unpredictability. Why? Because without surprise, life collapses into a flat, unchanging plate. A universe without uncertainty would be a museum exhibit, tidy, dead, and endlessly repeatable. Even God, Watts suggests, would eventually grow bored of omnipotence and invent free will simply to be surprised by his own creation. This is not a joke. It's a surgical insight into the structure of experience. Surprise, the intrusion of the unpredictable, is not an inconvenience. It is the oxygen of awareness. It is the spark that keeps consciousness awake. Eastern philosophy understood this long before technology gave us the illusion of perfect control. In Buddhism, the cornerstone is impermanence, the simple recognition that everything moves. In Taoism, the world flows by itself, spontaneous, ungraspable, playful. In Zen, the deepest insight comes not from order but from the moment reality refuses to behave as your mind expected. You can trace this thread through every tradition that takes life seriously. What is alive cannot be fully controlled, and what is fully controlled cannot be alive. Human beings forget this or pretend to forget it. You cling to the fantasy that perfect safety equals happiness. You dream of a life where nothing goes wrong. But imagine such a life honestly. Nothing unexpected, nothing challenging, nothing to question, no mistakes, no mystery. How would you stay awake? How would you stay human? A world without surprise is a world where the story has ended. Yet the characters continue walking through the script like ghosts. Free will matters not because it grants independence from a deity, but because it injects the possibility of doing something truly unpredictable. Something you yourself did not foresee. Something that interrupts the smooth mechanical flow of your routines. Without this element of the unknown, in yourself, in others, in the world, experience becomes a sterile simulation. Technically perfect, spiritually bankrupt. This is where Watts quietly overturns the modern obsession with security. You think chaos is the enemy. You try to minimize it, manage it, delete it from your life. But look closer. The moments that shaped you most were never the predictable ones. It was the accident, the encounter, the failure, the sudden shift, the thing you didn't plan. Surprise is not a glitch in the system. It is the system. The world refreshes itself through unpredictability. Your identity renews itself when the expected breaks open. Your aliveness spikes precisely when the script falls apart. So the question isn't whether chaos will visit you. It's whether you're awake enough to see that without it, your life would have no texture, no depth, and no meaning at all. Surprise is not the opposite of safety. Surprise is the opposite of death. Alan Watts liked to expose a particular human habit. We speak about heaven, salvation, eternal peace, and perfect happiness. Yet we almost never examine what those ideas actually imply. When pressed, people give polite answers, borrowed answers, or safe answers. But ask them to think it through to the end and they recoil. Because the deeper truth is uncomfortable. Most people don't actually know what they want from heaven. And many would find their own fantasies unbearable. Watts illustrated this with a story about a pious English gentleman who confidently declared he would go to heaven and enjoy eternal bliss, then added that he wished no one would bring up such a depressing topic. The joke lands because it reveals something essential. We cling to fantasies we're too frightened to examine. Try examining them now. If you were granted eternal life, would you truly want it? Imagine waking every day knowing nothing can ever end. No chapter, no risk, no deadline, no urgency. You would not be living, you would be looping. The idea of infinite time sounds comforting when you fear death, but if you carry the thought 1 inch further, it becomes clear. Meaning requires finitude. Stakes require uncertainty. Every story requires an ending. What about perfection? If everything were flawless, no mistakes, no surprises, no friction, you would rapidly lose any sense of aliveness. Perfection removes the contrast that gives experience shape. It collapses life into a bland continuum where nothing stands out because nothing can. And what about total safety? Without risk, action becomes mechanical. Decisions have no weight. Courage becomes irrelevant. Growth becomes impossible. If nothing real can be lost, then nothing real can be gained. Safety, taken to its extreme, makes life indistinguishable from a padded cell. Secure, silent, and suffocating. These questions reveal something most people avoid acknowledging. We think we want peace, but we chase chaos. Not consciously, of course. Consciously, you say you want calm, clarity, stability. Yet look closely at your life. Not the story you tell, but the way you actually behave. You seek stimulation. You escalate minor issues. You prolong conflicts. You revive old grievances. You create unnecessary complications. Why? Because drama is a crude substitute for aliveness. When you numb yourself with routine and control, you eventually manufacture problems just to feel the pulse again. The pain of disorder often feels preferable to the deadness of perfection. This is the avoidance what's wanted to confront. People don't dare think their fantasies through because the moment they do, they realize their desires contradict themselves. They want peace without boredom, safety without stagnation, perfection without lifelessness. They want the thrill of risk without the risk. And that impossible combination is precisely why they stay confused, restless, and dissatisfied. To think something through, truly through, is to watch your illusions collapse. And most people would rather keep the illusion than face the deeper truth. What they claim to want would destroy them if they ever got it. Alan Watts often invited people into a thought experiment deceptively simple but devastatingly revealing. If you could dream any dream you wanted each night, what would you choose? At first glance, it seems like a pleasant question. But if you follow it sincerely, not romantically, not sentimentally, it dismantles your assumptions about desire itself. Watts imagined the dream journey unfolding in 5 stages, each exposing a deeper layer of the human psyche. 1. The stage of indulgence, every wish granted. In the beginning, you would do what anyone would do, indulge. All the pleasures you suppress in waking life would bloom without consequence. You'd script endless victories, luxuries, sensual delights, triumphs. No fear, no effort, no uncertainty. You would binge on satisfaction the way a starving man devours a feast. But indulgence decays quickly. Pleasure without challenge becomes tasteless. The mind adapts and then demands more, not more pleasure but more aliveness. 2. The stage of adventure, seeking new sensations. So you would escalate. You'd craft quests, explorations, journeys into the unknown. You'd summon landscapes you've never seen and experiences no human has ever had. You would expand the world simply to feel yourself moving through it. But eventually, even adventure becomes predictable when you're the one writing the script. 3. The stage of danger, facing fear on purpose. To feel the pulse again, you would add risk. You would design challenges that could genuinely go wrong. You'd chase danger. Storms, enemies, cliffs, dark forests. Because fear has a texture that pleasure cannot replicate. It reminds you that something is at stake. But even here, you're still safe because somewhere inside the dream, you know you're dreaming. And that safety dilutes the experience. 4. The stage of forgetting, losing control. So you would make the boldest move of all. You would wipe your own memory. You would forget that you are the dreamer. You would drop yourself into the story with full vulnerability, without divine knowledge or guaranteed rescue. You would surrender control so the dream could feel real. And in that surrender, for the first time, you would feel fully alive. 5. The stage of becoming this life, the final surprise. Finally, inevitably, you would dream a dream indistinguishable from the life you are living right now, with its frustrations, with its uncertainties, with its beauty and grief and unplanned moments, with its limitations, its questions, and its fragile joys. Because the deepest desire is not pleasure, it's experience. Unfiltered, unpredictable, uncontrollable experience. Psychology actually supports this. Human beings require challenge, resistance, and difficulty to feel meaning. Without them, the self dissolves into numbness. Suffering is not a malfunction of existence. It is a structural feature of being conscious. It is contrast. It is depth. It is the shadow that allows the light to be recognized as light. And here comes the strike you cannot dodge. The life you are living right now is the dream you would eventually choose. Not because it is perfect, not because it is easy, but because it contains the precise blend of uncertainty, possibility, limitation, and mystery that makes experience possible at all. If you had the cosmic freedom to design your existence from scratch, after exhausting every fantasy, every adventure, and every godlike indulgence, you would end up here. Alan Watts often reminded his listeners that the world is not lacking in wonder. People are simply lacking the eyes to see it. A child can look at an ordinary tree and fall silent in awe. An adult looks at the same tree and mutters, "Oh, that's a tree," as if naming something were the same as knowing it. This is the tragedy of growing up. Labels replace perception, and the world turns flat. Watts wasn't romanticizing childhood. He was pointing toward a fundamental truth found at the heart of Eastern philosophy. In Zen, this is called Tin Kong Beat, the mind that doesn't rush to classify, interpret, or assume. It meets each moment as if it were genuinely new. In Japanese, this is Shoshin, the beginner's mind. And the irony is that beginners see more accurately than experts, because their vision isn't yet polluted by the dead weight of certainty. The moment you label something tree, sun, relationship, problem, life, your mind stops looking. It treats the label as the truth and ignores the raw reality in front of you. You're not seeing the world, you're seeing your concepts about it. Watts wanted people to notice this self-hypnosis. When was the last time you actually looked at anything without the mental commentary? A cup? A stranger? Your own hand? The truth is uncomfortable. You move through life half asleep, navigating a universe of labels, not a universe of phenomena. And then you wonder why everything feels dull. You're not bored by the world. You're bored by your own assumptions. Watch a child encounter the world, and you'll see something you've forgotten. They don't know what anything is, so everything is possible. A tree isn't a tree. It's a living column of the earth reaching into the sky, splitting into countless arms, waving green banners in the wind. The sun isn't that same sun I see every day. It's a blazing disk of fire suspended in an infinite void, so bright it warps the very air. A child's world is magical not because magic exists, but because their mind hasn't smothered reality with routine yet. Eastern philosophy insists that this capacity isn't lost, only buried. Zen masters urge students to see with fresh eyes, to peel away the crust of familiarity and meet the world without the stale logic of habit. Taoism teaches that the world is inherently strange, spontaneous, and alive, and that the more you try to impose your definitions on it, the more distant it becomes. Your real problem isn't that life has become ordinary. Your problem is that you've stopped paying attention. The world is still bizarre, absurd, impossible, and luminous. You simply learned to look through it instead of at it. You trained yourself to see symbols instead of surfaces, ideas instead of textures. And the challenge Watts quietly throws back at you is this. Can you drop what you think you know long enough to see what is actually there? Or will you keep mistaking the map for the territory and wonder why nothing feels alive anymore? There is a peculiar insight that runs through the work of G.K. Chesterton, and Alan Watts adored it because it slices directly into one of the biggest blind spots of the human mind. The world is fundamentally absurd, and that is precisely why it is magnificent. Chesterton once remarked that it is one thing to invent a story about griffins and gorgons, but quite another to confront the rhinoceros, a real creature that looks as if it shouldn't exist at all. His point was simple. Reality itself is far stranger than mythology, but people are too dulled by familiarity to notice. Watts seized this idea because it exposes a truth most people intuit but rarely admit. The universe is not rational in the strict, mechanical sense we pretend it is. It is not organized like a spreadsheet, nor structured like a moral rulebook. It is far closer to a joke, a cosmic comedy in which we take ourselves far too seriously. This is not cynicism. It is liberation. If you look closely at nature, you discover a wild incoherence that no tidy theology or scientific diagram can fully capture. Planets spin in empty space for no clear reason. Consciousness appears out of meat. Trees turn sunlight into sugar. Cats act like Zen masters one moment and fools the next. Humans wage wars, compose symphonies, make memes, fall in love, fear death, and cling to identities that evaporate the moment they are examined. Try to stuff all of this into a rigid system of meaning and you will fail. Try to build a universe where everything is perfectly logical, and you end up with something lifeless. That is why Chesterton found humor at the heart of existence, and why Watts insisted that anyone who approaches life without humor has fundamentally misunderstood it. The cosmic and the comic are inseparable. When Dante wrote the Divine Comedy, he wasn't merely being poetic. He was naming a truth. The universe is not a tragedy, nor a romance, but a strange, sprawling comedy where contradictions refuse to resolve. But humans struggle with this. They want the world to be serious, purposeful, ordered, and just because they fear the alternative. They fear that if life isn't a moral puzzle with clear rules, then nothing matters. But that fear blinds them to the deeper possibility. Meaning is not something the universe hands to you. It is something you participate in creating. The world is not nonsense in the nihilistic sense. It is nonsense in the playful sense. A dance, a swirl, a spontaneous unfolding that doesn't obey the stiff logic of the human mind. It is nonsense in the way a firework is nonsense. No justification, no utility, just beauty exploding for its own sake. And here is the paradox Watts wanted people to digest without flinching. Life becomes unbearable when you demand it to be more serious than it is. And life becomes luminous the moment you allow it to be as strange, comic, and improbable as it has always been. If you've walked with me through this entire exploration, then you've already sensed the uncomfortable truth rising to the surface. You've spent most of your life chasing an idea of perfection that would quietly suffocate you if you ever managed to catch it. You imagine that a flawless life, smooth, predictable, orderly, would make you happy. But perfection is simply boredom dressed up in spiritual clothing. It is the slow death of curiosity, surprise, and the raw texture of experience. What you call chaos, the thing you fear and try to escape, is the very force keeping you alive. Every moment that ever mattered to you carried an element of uncertainty. You didn't know how the conversation would go, whether the risk would work, whether the person would say yes, whether you would survive the loss. The pulse of living is intertwined with not knowing. Remove that and you remove the pulse. Somewhere along the way you forgot this. You forgot how to see the world as the strange and shimmering phenomenon it actually is. You began to treat life like a set of problems to solve, obstacles to overcome, logistics to manage. You replaced wonder with efficiency, curiosity with strategy, presence with control. And then you wondered why everything felt dull. Life did not become dull. You wrapped it in assumptions until its colors disappeared. You smothered mystery with certainty. You drowned spontaneity under plans. You taught yourself to look through the world rather than at it. And in that process, you lost the one capacity that makes existence bearable, the ability to be astonished. So let's speak plainly. If your life feels overwhelmingly complicated, it may be because you are gripping tightly at things that were never meant to be controlled. You are exhausting yourself by managing what doesn't need managing. You are tightening your hold on a river and then resenting the water for slipping through your fingers. And if your life feels unbearably dull, it may be because you've layered so many interpretations, labels, and expectations on top of your experience that nothing can reach you directly anymore. You are living inside a conceptual echo chamber, reacting not to life itself but to your mental commentary about it. This is the point Alan Watts tried to make again and again. You don't need a new life. You need a new way of seeing the one you've already got. Let me leave you with one final question. Not a riddle, not a moral test, but a mirror. If you could dream any dream tonight, absolutely anything, would you dare dream the dream that leads you right back here, into this life with all its risks, its messiness, its vulnerability, and its staggering possibility? Because if the answer is yes, even quietly, even reluctantly, then you've understood something profound. This life, exactly as it is not a mistake. It is the dream you eventually would have chosen.